start the clock for questions. And the first question, the gentleman here. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Barker. I'm an elected member of Surrey County Council and a member of the Surrey Police Authority, which, as you know, in November I'm redundant. Could the Minister tell me in his clear and compelling manner how I failed?
All yours, Minister.
Well, don't tempt me, Mr. Barker. I mean, it's in the County Council's decision on the council tax. However, the point is we have an opportunity to do things better. The argument for police and crime commissioners is that, however, I don't think many people in Surrey are aware of who the chairman of the police authority is. I don't know how many people will be aware of your very good work on the police authority. But we think it is appropriate for there to be a much clearer link between the electorate and the direction of policing policy locally. It is about trying to bring the whole criminal justice system closer to the people that it serves. So this is not to say that you have failed. We think there is a better way of delivering it and delivering greater confidence in the delivery of criminal justice in police area by police area, and that's why we will be electing police and crime commissioners across the country from November. But the last thing you should do is to take that as some form of implied reproach to the great work that you and other people will have done on police authorities, but inevitably it has been largely invisible to the public, given the structure that you've been working in, and we want to make it much more visible and give it a much clearer face to the public.
Thank you. The gentleman here, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I am John Cook from Lincolnshire Police Authority, and I'm not going to ask you why you've got rid of police authorities. That is clear and well put by you. I don't agree with you, but that's fair. What I would like to ask is from your particular keynote speech, where you actually now put a great deal of emphasis on your new Police and Crime Commissioner and how they are meant to deal with the local county community safety boards, community safety partnerships, CDRPs, and local justice providers. And I note that you are putting funding in to ensure that that will occur. So there's a responsibility placed on the PCC, understandable. There's funding going along with it, that's understandable. Could you give me a little bit more detail on how you envisage that the PCC is going to bring these bodies together and to make it effective and efficient?
Thank you very much.
Well, across some of the better examples of coordination have sat within community safety partnerships and within local criminal justice boards where they've worked well. But clearly, if you have a police and crime commissioner, it will be my expectation that they will then become a focus for the more effective joining up of the system. Our system fails at its joins, where people, if I look at the offender management system, it's when it's offenders moving from custody into the community that are points of weakness. And it is what I want to see are police and crime commissioners who do increasingly take responsibility for not just a one golf club approach to crime in their community. I want to see a system where police and crime commissioners are able to draw together all the agencies to ensure that they don't just take an approach which says we're going to lock up every conceivable burglar we can find in our local area. What we're actually going to do is do something about the supply chain of what is turning people into burglars in the first place, to get them properly engaged with the important new changes to the public health delivery, so that some of the underlying causes around addiction and mental health issues that are part of the supply chain and the continuing problem we'll have to deal with offenders cycling around the system, so that this becomes part of their set of priorities as well. And I think that an accountable agency, and the more accountable we can make them for expenditure and becoming face-to-face with the realities of the totality of the costs on the justice system, then I think we will begin to draw the local justice system much more effectively together. And certainly I will be looking at the delivery of these roles with a view to making it quite clear that they are not able to take as a free good, say, custody or probation services delivered from the centre. These will be things that these will be things that they will increasingly want them to be bearing into account, and to try and deliver and drive the savings across the whole of the system by addressing what we all want, which is a significant improvement in the cycling of current offenders around the system and early intervention to prevent people falling into the criminal justice system in the first place.
Thank you. Debbie?
Yeah, I just want to add to that, really. I'm Director of Justice for Working Links, and at Working Links, we're one of the providers who are on the government's PBR frameworks, the MOJ's PBR frameworks, or lots. But equally, we're also a partner to the newly announced HMPS partnership, which is the opportunity for HMPS to deliver public sector reform in a new way. And I think we really welcome the Police and Crime Commissioner's role, because I think for the first time, with PBR looming, there's an opportunity to join up the whole of the criminal justice system and the whole of the offender journey. For far too long, prisons and probation have worked very closely together, and they've really integrated the services, and police and crime prevention has been going along in parallel to that. So the introduction of this role is an opportunity to bring it all together, and we certainly support that. And as payment by results happens, and as a provider in that sort of world, the overall aim of payment by results is to stop reoffending. And if we're not working together as a criminal justice unit and as a criminal justice system, then ultimately providers like ourselves and our supply chains won't get paid. So the more we can join up, the more we can bring it together at a local level, then the better. And it's a great step in the right direction to be able to do that. I don't think it's going to be easy, and I don't think it's going to be straightforward, and there'll be bumps along the way, but I'd rather go through that pain and end up in a system that is more joined up. And actually, it's not just about a reduction of reoffending, but it's stopping the offence in the first place, so we get that total demand reduction from an integrated approach.
Thank you. Should we go to this side, please?
Thank you very much. Tim Wilson, NAPO, which is the probation trade union. And this is for the whole panel. So good morning, everyone. And it's a question around community sentencing. Obviously, since the mid-1980s, successive Home Office ministers and ministers of justice have regularly, almost repeatedly, talked about the need for community sentences to become tougher so that they can win the confidence of the community, victims, and the sentencers. What we've seen since that time, of course, is the inexorable rise in the prison population from around 45,000 as it was then in the mid-80s to around about 85,000 in May 2010. And obviously since then, unfortunately, we've seen a further rise to over 87,000. I'm just wondering if everyone on the panel could perhaps provide their ideas or reassurances as to how the latest iterations on talking community sentences to be tougher, how we can be sure that that will actually have an impact on the horrendous rise in prison population and the horrendous costs involved. Thank you.
Thank you. It's like news night, isn't it, really? Ian.
Well, Baroness, thank you. I think Tim's question gets to the heart of the matter in terms of value for money, because that's been a big theme of today's discussions. From the standpoint of the Probation and Family Court Union, which I'm here to represent, you won't be surprised to hear that we are extremely doubtful that a lot of the reforms we've heard talked about in terms of the role of the probation service, for example, will work in practice. we've all heard about the need to have joined up approaches to the criminal justice system. We support all of that. Our union doesn't stand in the way of progress. We support the need for efficiency savings. What we are seeing, though, is a lack of support for frontline staff, Minister. We're not seeing computer systems at work. We're not seeing a joined-up system. And so we have grave doubts that the approach to making community sentencing tougher, along with the proposed privatisation of the same, is actually going to bring it further into public disrepute. So we want to see tangible evidence that what you're going to deliver is going to help people at the front line and free up their professional skills.
It's fair to say that this is not unique to the UK. We've got vast experience worldwide. Where the best results are is actually where agencies all work together to pull in the same direction. And our experience as a private sector supplier working within this sector is that on occasions, sometimes locally, sometimes nationally, we don't always get on the same message at the same time to do the same thing. So I sort of support the view about police and crime commissioners. If they're truly accountable to drive those things forward, that will work. With regards to standardisation of approach, we have a number of different systems working locally that don't speak to each other. We don't share intelligence effectively. We sometimes try to get the same aim but in a different way. And until you join all those up, you're always going to end up with the same result, which is increased reoffending, larger prison populations, etc. But payment result will focus everybody on the same aim. If everybody's targeted in a correct manner with the correct outcomes, then that will drive the change that's required.
David?
Thank you. I speak at a lot of conferences and I sit at a lot of events where we talk about these type of issues, and the similar question always comes up. Should community sentences be tougher? Should prison sentences be tougher? And what I should say is I think we need to rethink our language. Community sentences should be more effective. And it's what we do on the sentence that will actually determine how that offender changes their behaviour and how that affects our communities and affects the people when the offender comes off the sentence. I think if we rethink our language and look at how we can do better for less with them sentences, and actually work with the individuals going through, then as a society we'll all benefit from that, because the sentence, community or prison-based, will have been used to its best effect. The time on that community sentence, the time on the prison sentence will have been used so that we can actually stand a chance to stop that offender recommitting further crimes. Everyone stands to benefit then by reducing reoffending, by keeping a single offender away from a life of crime. That one offender costs over £1 million through their life. So if we use the sentence more effectively, rather than just getting them tougher, then we all stand to benefit from it.
Thank you, Debbie. Minister.
Tim, as usual, very extremely perspicacious question. And I would hope that we are delivering the answer in terms of freeing up the front line, which is the challenge you threw down to us. I mean, in terms of the management of the probation service, we've taken 40 pages or whatever it is of targets and performance instructions and reduced them down, as I answered, to about 3, with what was mandatory is now, in a sense, is good practice guidance, and therefore giving much greater flexibility to the officers on the ground who actually got to make the decisions, and give them greater flexibility about how they carry out their work. And we've got to make sure that the community sentencing framework does properly reflect the principles of sentencing. What we're trying to achieve is a sentence of someone who has committed a serious enough offence to warrant a community sentence, or then a custodial sentence, to get the right balance between punishment, protecting the public as a consequence of that sentence, so that person is either taken out of circulation, either in prison through custody, or in the community through effective monitoring. And there are opportunities opening up for us in terms of protecting the public around the technology of electronic monitoring, which we are going to explore. We want a much greater effectiveness in delivery of reparation as a part of sentencing between the offender and the victim. That's why we're strengthening the duty on compensation, and we will be expecting sentencers as their first point of departure to actually be thinking about the compensation due to the victim. And just because they've sent someone to custody or a community sentence doesn't mean that they will not be, that duty on them has been obviated. And of course, rehabilitation. In the end, we've got the purpose of the sentences to try and make sure that that individual is not going to cycle around the system again. And that package of 4 principles has then got to add up to a decent deterrence framework that carries public confidence that we actually have a criminal justice system that deters people from crime. And that, the duty of achieving that balance sits, really, frankly, whatever the outcome of this is going to be, community sentences or custody, and we've got to try and get that right and have a, hopefully, a maturer debate about where the right balance sits between all of those elements of the principles of sentencing. And we will shortly publish our proposals around community sentencing, together with our proposals for reform of the probation service, and I think that they will, I hope that everyone here will see them as a major step forward, you in particular, Tim, in terms of delivering the agenda that sits behind your question.
Thank you very much. The gentleman, yes, the gentleman here.
Sorry, I'm Ian Ainshaw from the London School of Economics and Privacy International. Throughout the whole of human history, the guardians in society have been separated from trade because guardianship has a particular ethical system and trade has a different and an incompatible ethical system. If you merge the two, as by payment by results, the very best you can hope for is ambiguity, and the worst is corruption. So how are you going to deal with that?
I assume this is addressed to the Minister.
Well, it hasn't happened in the custody system, where we have the guardians who are being provided by private companies who are now running a dozen of our prisons. That hasn't happened, so I'm afraid I must disagree with you. There has obviously got to be proper oversight of this, and we will, in coming forward with our proposals around probation and around community sentences and around the progress of payment by results, I can assure you we are very conscious of the balance in between wishing to incentivize rehabilitation on the one hand and get people, get all of the voluntary sector, the private sector, and the public sector engaged in thinking about what are the necessary interventions to help offenders within our system stop reoffending. But at the same time, you're right to point out, there is a duty on us about public protection. It is the first, security is the first responsibility of any government. And we would be, if we then let ourselves open to a place where we found that people were attempting to rehabilitate people at the expense of public protection, then quite plainly that would come with a price, and we've got to get that balance right. And I can assure you we have absolutely no intention of getting it wrong, and fully understand the duties that sit upon the government.
Thank you. Ian?
I just want to add to that, if I may. We've had a lot today about transfer of risk. In the probation service, we would say that risk has been created because of the lack of resources that have been put into the probation service over recent years. And I touched upon those when I spoke a few minutes ago. So you've made a market, Minister. It's cost hundreds of thousands of pounds of public money to create. There aren't yet, as we see it, the necessary checks and balances in place. I could turn you to A4E, couldn't I, this week, about checks and balances, and we're going to have to look at what happens there. So our concern is, having created the market, is it going to then fall apart because of the very lackadaisical financial auditing systems that may follow?
Well, I think I do want to respond to that, because there's a challenge both there and from the questioner about the impact of the private sector and competition. But the simple fact is that competition in custodial services, for example, has driven innovation and very substantial efficiency savings. We've competed Her Majesty's Prison, Birmingham, last year, and in that competition, when the public sector, faced with trying to put together an effective bid in order to try and retain the business there, were actually driving out, their bid saw more job savings in the management of that prison than in the end the successful private sector bid. But they've taken the lesson from that, and I'm delighted to say that the public sector, in putting together their preparation for delivering the bids for the new round of prison competitions, that we've had a very successful engagement with the Prison Officers Association, who have concluded an engagement around fair and sustainable, a future reward strategy for prison officers, which is going to put the public sector in a much better shape to succeed against the best private sector companies bidding for these institutions. And at the same time, they've gone further than that, and they are looking at their facilities management in that bid being provided by Mighty. And this is all the effect. This is the effect of competition, of people getting together and thinking about how to deliver things about innovatively and more efficiently. And we come from, I'm afraid, different assumptions, philosophical assumptions on this. I simply do not believe that people who are running a business are somehow wicked and corrupt and determined and private sector companies bidding for work in this area, their ethical requirements on them and their corporate reputation is frankly on the line every time they are conducting these services. And if it's then seen that they are taking the implied ethical framework from your question, then they're not going to stay in business very long. And actually, we need to draw on the best of people in the whole criminal justice system, whether they're working in the public sector, the private sector, or the charitable or voluntary sector. All of these groups have got to get together, and we've got to get people working as effectively as they can together and drawing on all the strengths of all of those different parts who can contribute to our work.
David? Oh, Debbie first.
Okay, so. Yes, I just want to respond to that in terms of both the guardianship and the trade. In terms of trade, the way we're moving and the rehabilitation revolution and the introduction of the private sector and payment by results means for the first time ever, you are being paid for a change of behaviour by the offender themselves. There's lots of confusion, and people think that PBR in the criminal justice system is similar to the work programme or DWP, where people are being paid for that job or that sustainable employment. It's not. It's going to be about the offender themselves. They're going to be at the heart of this, and nobody will be paid until that offender changes their behaviour and stops reoffending. So in terms of trade, that's a very difficult ask. And, you know, the providers who are entering this sphere are putting themselves on the line to ensure that that behaviour change happens. So it's not just about a tick in a box about a job or a training placement. It's that genuine behaviour change. In terms of the guardianship, as the Minister alluded there, I think the choice is about a mixed economy of partnerships. Yes, there's public sector, yes, there's private sector. And as Crispin alluded to, HMPS have created a new alternative to that. They put together a public-private voluntary sector partnership. So as part of that partnership with HMPS, Working Links, Mighty and Sure Trust, you've got all of that package together. You've got the guardianship because HMPS are part of that process. You've got the private sector ethos, and you've got the voluntary sector support in there as well. So I think there are alternatives for us all to look at that balance your concerns and put the offender first.
David?
And just quickly, I think it's an ideological myth that private sector and public sector employees have different approaches to work. Invariably, people that are employed within the care and justice community within G4S are all volunteer to do the job because they want to work within the criminal justice sector. And more importantly, large private companies would cease trading within a nanosecond if they didn't do the right thing. The care and value core values within trade are inherently different than before. So I think to sort of suggest that private companies coming in are just in there for the buck it needs to be a little bit more maturely thought through. Those days of rogue trades are clearly not there, because there are checks and balances in place to ensure that doesn't happen.
We have just time for one very quick question, and the gentleman here who should have got it last time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Simon Alders. I'm the coordinator of the Drug and Alcohol Action Team in Suffolk. Just one very quick point. We've been letting incentivised contracts for a couple of years now, and what we've seen is better efficiency, and actually our performance improved to the point where we've received increased grants rather than a reduction in grants. So I think there's people need to understand that, as you've said, there's a very clear incentive for people to do well. My question is actually about, in the current suggestion in prisons about people working full-time in prison, and that some of that money is going to come out and go down to victims. I'm just interested in the detail about how that money that's generated in prisons will come down to victim support, and how will that be seen, and how will that then go to support victims of crime in a county like Suffolk?
Thank you.
The precise detail of how that's going to work is absolutely a work in progress. This is the first place we've got to get to is work happening in prisons that is at least not economically negative. We have 9,000 prisoners engaged in what is called work in prisons today, and actually the vast majority of them are on a highly effective rehabilitative program called work, but it actually costs the prison system in order to run that work. Well, we're not in that place where we have the option of increasing that program, because we don't have any money. So which is why, wherefore, what we want to do is to actually get this much more focused on a commercial basis, and getting prisoners to work effectively and economically effective in a custodial setting is a challenge that has eluded most governments across the world. So what we're engaged in now in trying to deliver the Work in Prisons program is extremely difficult to get right, and that's why we're doing a lot of work now on making sure that we get the code of practice right, that the principles around fair competition are set up, so that, and then we've got to get to grips with the detail. If we get ourselves into the happy place that we actually begin to generate surpluses from the prisoner labour out of that work that goes beyond the costs of running the business in prison and the current prisoner allowance that is paid for what is called work in prison today, then we anticipate that will then be, the surplus will then be split between victims and the rehabilitation of those prisoners. Exactly how those funds will be dispersed will then be governed by a statutory instrument which we will introduce under the powers we're taking in the legal aid and sentencing bills before Parliament now, and it will overtake the Prisoner Earnings Act, which currently only applies to those lucky prisoners who are sitting in open prisons and going out every day to work and being protected through employment rights with the minimum wage and the rest. What we've got to do is address prisoners who are working in a custodial setting without the standard employment rights, and then we will then see how much their work then generates, both for their own rehabilitation and also for victims of crime. I'm loath to start spending money that we've yet earned. We would be, and in the course of this, we would be a very, very long way forward if we simply delivered work in prisons on a much wider scale and there was no overall surplus. Because you've then got the whole very substantial rehabilitative effect of the prisoners working, acquiring a functioning CV in prison and all the opportunities that has for their rehabilitation, and also for the management of the prison regime itself. If we get beyond that and actually have successful businesses generating significant sums for victims and the prisoners' direct rehabilitation, then we will have something which we will be able to show with very considerable pride to the rest of the world about what we've managed to achieve here in the UK.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we come to just about midday, and it's time now for the workshop sessions. But before I release the panel, could I, on behalf of all of you, thank them very much indeed. It's been a fascinating half an hour, and I'm sure you'll agree they have answered your questions brilliantly. So thank you on behalf of all of us.